It's been about a month since my last Grand Race meta video, and there have been lots of changes to the list. Let's go! Real quick before I get into the video, if you're looking for any of my Motorfest tunes or my Need for Speed Heat builds, I've moved everything to my website. It's militiagamingco.com. There's links in the main navigation menu for Need for Speed Heat builds and Motorfest Pro settings, so click those if you're looking for that. The link to the site is actually in the description of this video. Alright, enjoy. Now, everyone has their own favorite cars to use, and I haven't tested all of them yet, so please help the community by leaving your favorite cars to drive in the comments section, especially if you didn't see them here on my list. Alright, so for this video, I'm going to be showing you my full meta list in each class. However, I'm only going to be talking specifically about the changes. For the classes where no changes took place between this video and the last one, I'll quickly show you the meta and then move on. Here we go. Starting with Street 1. In Street 1, we do not have any changes. No changes to the best, the contenders, or the viable categories. This is the full meta list for Street 1. Moving on to Street 2. Now, we didn't have any changes to the top of the list. I still have the 911 993, the ZR1, and the Hurricane, but we did add a couple of cars to the contenders and the viable area, and then we also had to demote one of the cars in the contenders class. So in the contenders, we've got the F40, the Honda NSX, and then the new edition, Viper Lightning Edition. This Viper Lightning Edition is super easy to drive. It's something that sticks to the road very well. It has decent but not great turning radius, meaning that it actually understeers just a tiny bit. However, it makes up for it in a big way with gutter turns. It is one of the most controllable cars for gutter turning. If you have a problem with gutter turning, this car actually can help you a lot. Now, moving into the viable category, we have the F12 Berlinetta, which I dropped from the contenders from last video. I replaced it with the Viper Lightning Edition. It is still a very good car, and you can absolutely win with that car. However, I just think the Viper is just a little bit better. Then we have the GTR Haro Edition and the SL63 4MATIC. The SL63 is a new car for this list. This car is absolutely a beast when it comes to acceleration. It does very well. It does understeer just a little bit, but it is very controllable. It has a lot of gears, which means that acceleration in every gear is going to be great. And then it actually has pretty decent top speed. It's one of the cars that I would say is probably like a sleeper-ish car for this class. It's one that you just don't think of when you think of Street 2. And if you haven't used it in the Grand Races, I suggest trying it out. Definitely check out my video with the tune on it. It'll definitely make it a little bit nicer to drive. And finally, the Corvette C8 Stingray, which was there from last meta video. We did drop two cars from this class, and that is the Carrera 4S Timeless Edition. This car honestly is still really good. I tested it again right before recording this video, and it is a very good car. I just think it's a very tough decision to drop this car from the viable category, because I think on any given day it can compete with those cars. So it's really tough. I just had to make a really tough call here because I don't want to put more than 4 cars in that viable category. And for me, the difference is that the 4S Timeless tends to lose the rear end. It's very slippy and sometimes can be hard to drive. That being said, it is fast, so it's definitely something you can use, but anyway, it just didn't make the list. And then we also dropped the Diablo. The Diablo is, again, very good, but it's a slow shifting car, and it doesn't really have the full top speed that I really want out of Street 2, so it's just something we had to drop. All right, let's move into the drift category. There's only 2 changes for this one. We moved the Murcielago from the best category down into the contenders, and then I added the Hoonigan Evo 9 to the best category. This car is very similar to the Unicorn. It's fast, it handles very nicely, it's all-wheel drive. It's maybe a little bit more controllable than the Unicorn, but certainly not off-road. It still has that super terrible off-road feeling where you just turn the car a little bit and the whole thing wants to slide, but it is very fast, definitely better than the Agera R and the Aventador and the Murcielago. So demotion for the Murcielago moves into the contenders, and a promotion for the Hoonigan Evo 9. All right, moving into the racing class, we have no changes to the best category. It is still the Gallardo Super Trofeo, the Camaro SS, and the Ferrari 458. But if we move into the contenders, we did add one to the contenders. It's the Expo GT2. The Expo GT2 is very controllable, very easy to use. The one downside on this is that its turn in is very slow. But once you've had some experience with it and you kind of understand how slow it turns in, it's not like unusually slow. It feels fine. It's just a little bit slower than some of the other classes. In fact, the Camaro SS actually has this issue too, But this car actually hugs the turns very nicely, and it's got great acceleration. It's a car that I think you should definitely buy and check out. And if you haven't got a tune on it, obviously check out my tune video. But it is the only new addition to that contender class. The Bugatti Bolide and the Murcielago are the other two contenders in this class. I think all three of those cars perform pretty much the same, although they drive differently. In terms of overall performance, I feel like they are the same. Even though I've got the Murcielago above the Bolide and the Expo, I feel like they're all kind of the same, definitely contenders. And then for the viable category, we added the Challenger SRT8 392. This is one we just did a video on this week. It's actually a really good car. It feels insane to drive. It's very stuck to the road, but it also kind of feels like that Camaro SS where it has good turning radius, but it just feels like it's gonna understeer, but then it doesn't. It's kind of strange. Anyway, it's not quite as good as the Camaro, but it's definitely in the viable category. It's one that I enjoy driving in the grand races. I just think it doesn't have the full capabilities of the Camaro SS. In addition to that, we dropped the FXXK from the contenders down to the viable category. It was because I added the Expo to the contenders. I think the Expo is significantly better than the FXX, although if you're a new player, again, I'll recommend this FXXK. It is a very good, easy to control car. It just understeers a little bit too much for my liking. I think some of the other cars would take advantage of that understeer in a head-to-head match. Now, before I get into the hypercar category, about 75% of you guys are not subscribed to the channel. If you find this helpful, please consider subscribing. I bring multiple Motorfest videos to you every single day. All right, back to the list. All right, moving on to the hypercar class, there's a lot of changes to this one, including a change to the best in category. We've added the F8 right there below the Agera R. The Agera R I still think is the king, but the F8 is so easy to drive compared to the Agera R. I think the F8 will be the most driven car. So I think the Agera is actually the best. The F8 being more controllable, definitely I think more players are going to pick this. And then of course we've got the Cento Dieci as well, still in the best category. If we move into the contenders category, we've got the Jesco and the 458 Special. But we've also introduced the EB110 anodized edition. I think it's significantly better than the EB110, and because of that, we've dropped the regular EB110 down into the viable category. It's still a favorite of mine to drive, but we had to drop it because that anodized edition is better. Now, for the viable category for the hypercar class, we've got the EB110, the Revuelto, and then the Reventon, which is a new addition to this one. I think the Reventon is a little bit underrated. It feels very much like the Revuelto, but not quite as wild as the Revuelto. In terms of test times, they're really similar. The Reventon is a little bit easier to drive, and also it's easier to drive off-road as well. Doesn't spin out as much as the Revuelto, so that one definitely makes the viable category. And then the Noble M600 we also had to drop from the contenders class. It is still so good, and you could see that with the last summit. It's actually very, very viable. It's a car that accelerates really, really well. It turns very well, but it does have a little issue with torque steer. More throttle gives it more angle, and that's kind of natural for cars, but for this one, it becomes a little bit of an annoyance. And so although it's very good to drive, I think it definitely takes a little bit of time getting used to. Now, we did drop 3 cars from this class, the 918 Spider, the MC20, and the 911 GT1. All 3 cars we had to drop from this class because we did have 3 new additions, which were the F8, the EB110 anodized, and the Reventon. So this hypercar class is super competitive. Those 3 cars that we dropped are still pretty good, but I would say they're definitely not as good as the cars in this viable category. All right, let's move into the Alpha GP. Not a lot of changes here, but we did add the RB14 to the contenders category. I did a lot of testing on specifically the Red Bull Alpha GP cars, and what I found out was the RB14 and the RB14 Disruption Edition are really close, and the Disruption Edition maybe just handles a little bit better, and therefore it sort of edges out that RB14 in the best category. But I'd say it's the IVT07, the RB14 Disruption Edition, and the Alpha Mark II. All 3 of those cars do very, very well for the class, but to be really honest, these cars are not separated by very much. They are super, super close, so dividing them by best, contenders, and viable is actually really difficult. And for right now, the IVT07 and the RB14 Disruption are the fan favorites. Those are the cars that everybody's using right now. All right, let's move into Motocross. Now this one actually had a big shakeup. Last video I recommended the 450 EXC Nighthawk edition, but to be honest with you, it's just a bike that I've been driving and actually doing very well with since the launch of the game. However, after doing testing of all the motocross bikes, I came to the conclusion that the YZ450F is significantly better than the Nighthawk edition. In fact, the 450 EXC Red Bull edition and the 450 EXC are also better than the Nighthawk edition. So we've got a full new best category for you. I really strongly recommend the YZ450. It is head and shoulders above the rest of the bikes. It has way better top speed, better acceleration, better reaction to NOS. It's just all around a much better bike. The YZ450 is the only bike you should be using in that one motocross section that we have in Grand Races. All right, moving into Rally Raid, there are no changes for Rally Raid. We've got the same 2 cars in the best category. I am leaving a space open in best because I don't think any of the other Rally Raid vehicles deserve that spot. I think the Z4 and the Wrangler Evo 2 are actually head and shoulders above the contenders. So with that being said, what's the difference between the two? The Z4 actually is a little bit more wild. It turns a little bit faster, it oversteers a little bit more, but also because of that you end up losing more traction. Now the Wrangler Evo 2 has more traction, but it tends to understeer just a little bit. It's a little bit of a trade-off, and from my perspective, I actually think the Z4 is a little bit better, but it is super situational. Like, it just really depends on the route you take. The Wrangler Evo 2 is obviously more controllable and definitely better for lesser skilled players, but I think both cars are basically even on this one. All right, moving into the rally category. Now, this is one where I actually feel like I've been neglecting this car. I added the Countryman All 4 to the best category, and I'll tell you why. This car actually performs very well in Grand Races. I've had some more time to test this car in Grand Races, not necessarily on a test course. The difference is actually pretty good. It performs really well on the courses where you have like a lot of bumps and a lot of hills, and it almost feels like a rally raid section, but you're in a rally car, and that's where you want to use this one. It just absorbs a lot of the stress on the suspension better than the C3. The C3 is really stiff, and the Fiesta is really stiff as well, but the Countryman has a little bit more bounce to it, and I feel like that is something that helps it kind of float over all of those big bumps, and it just makes the car more controllable. And in addition to that, it has really good speed. It can keep up with the C3, especially if you're in slip. I mean, you can easily stay with someone in a C3. However, overall, I think the C3 is definitely better, but again, this comes down to situation. Now, the rest of this class is actually the same. The contenders are still the R34 Skyline, the Lancer WRC05, the Cooper S, and then for the viable category, we've got the Exige S and the 911 GT3. Now, monster truck and plane are still the same. It's the Silverado and the P51 Mustang. I appreciate you watching this video. If you're looking to support this channel in a bigger way, I've just opened up memberships. You can join to get exclusive perks like sneak peeks at all of the upcoming videos, members only community posts and polls, and a 20% off coupon to my Shitbox t-shirt store. A link to that is in the description. All right, thank you so much for watching. I will catch you on the next one. Trigger out.